Qley's voice cut through the noise of 20 family members like a blade. "Logan," she said, and I knew that tone. 7 years of marriage had taught me exactly what it meant. She'd already decided. Apologize to Derek right now, or get out of my house. My house. I'd poured the foundation for that house with my own savings. My name was on the mortgage, but I let the words go, because what was coming next mattered far more than correcting her. Everyone was watching. Her parents, her Aunt Patrice, cousins scattered around the oval table, candles still burning between the centerpieces Qley had spent 3 hours arranging. And there was Derek, her younger brother, leaning back in his chair with that lazy half-smile, watching like a man who already knew the ending. 38 years of watching people fold around him had made him very confident about that. I set down my fork. I pushed back my chair. The scrape of wood against hardwood was the only sound in the room. I walked around the table slowly and stopped directly in front of him. His smile didn't drop. Not yet. I leaned in close, so only he could hear me, and I said 7 words. I won't repeat them yet, because to understand why those 7 words drained the color from Derek Reed's face, you need to understand what he did to me first, and what I had already done about it before I ever sat down at that dinner table. My name is Logan Mercer. I'm 41 years old. I grew up in Akron, Ohio, where you learned early that nobody hands you anything. My father worked a rubber plant for 22 years. My mother cleaned houses. Neither ever complained. That work ethic was the only inheritance they left me, and I treated it like gold. By 35, I was running regional operations for a logistics company in Columbus, managing 18 distribution routes across 4 states, supervising 63 people, with a reputation for fixing situations without drama. Patient, methodical, the kind of man who gathered information before he spoke. I met Qley at a conference in Cincinnati. She was electric in front of a room, smart, funny, completely at ease under attention. I was the opposite of that, and I think that's partly what drew her to me. 2 years later, we were married outside Hocking Hills State Park, surrounded by orange leaves and people who mattered to us. I loved Qley. I need to say that clearly, because everything that follows is going to make that love complicated and painful. The house on Willow Bend Drive was mine before it was ours. I'd bought it at 33, before I ever met Qley. I knew which floorboard squeaked, and exactly when the water heater needed replacing. That house was the first thing I'd ever owned that felt genuinely permanent. When Qley moved in, she brought energy and a gift for decorating that transformed every room she touched. She also brought Derek into our lives, consistently and at a cost that kept climbing. Derek Reed was 4 years younger than Qley, living in an apartment their parents had been partially subsidizing for years. He called himself a freelance brand consultant, which in practice meant he attended events, took meetings about things that never materialized, and spent money on clothes designed to make him look like someone who had already made it. I tried with Derek, genuinely, but he talked around every question instead of through it, charming in that effortless way some people use to avoid saying anything real. The first incident happened 18 months into our marriage. Derek called Qley in a panic. 3 months behind on rent, needed $6,000 immediately. Qley came to me with the look that told me the conversation was already settled. "He's my brother," she said. I agreed, because we had the money, and because I was hoping the rescue might become a turning point for him. I wrote the check myself, drove to his apartment, handed it over without making him feel small. 3 weeks later, I saw him photographed at a $1,200 a plate charity gala, wearing a suit that had definitely not been in his closet when I dropped off that check. I mentioned it to Qley. She told me I was reading too much into a photograph. I filed it away. That's what I do with information I can't yet use. 8 months later, Derek arrived at Sunday dinner, buzzing about a new venture, a curated subscription box that needed $20,000 in startup capital. When he said it, he looked directly at me, not at Qley, at me. Something in my chest went cold and quiet. I asked to see a business plan. He said it was more of a concept phase. I pressed gently. Projections, margins, supply chain. He smiled, like the question was slightly beneath the conversation. We didn't give him the money. The subscription box lasted 4 months before quietly disappearing. What didn't disappear was the shift in how Derek treated me at family events after that. It started small, interrupting me mid-sentence, correcting minor details in stories I was telling, wrong on purpose, forcing me to either let the error stand or look petty for correcting it. Jokes at my expense. Nothing vicious enough to call out directly, just enough to position himself as the sharper wit, and me as the slow, overly serious husband who didn't quite get it. Qley laughed with reflexive affection that didn't notice what it was endorsing. The night at her cousin's birthday party was when he crossed a real line. I was deep in a solid conversation with Qley's uncle about construction when Derek walked over, listened for 90 seconds, and announced to the group, "Logan's the expert on boring things. You want exciting, talk to someone else." The group laughed. I smiled. I went to the bathroom, stood at the sink, looked at my face in the mirror for 30 seconds, then went back out. I didn't say anything to Qley that night. I was thinking. Over the following months, I did what I'm genuinely good at. I documented every comment Derek made at my expense, the date, the setting, who was present. I tracked the money, $6,000 from the first loan, never repaid, and I started asking quiet questions in Columbus's business community about the investors and clients Derek was always name-dropping. What I found was illuminating. He wasn't a brand consultant. He was a man living on borrowed money, borrowed credibility, and borrowed time. Then a friend in commercial real estate pointed me towards something bigger. Derek had been a minor partner in a property flipping scheme in the Short North District. It collapsed after a dispute with the primary investor, a man named Garrett Shelton, who had significant resources and a significant grievance. I filed that name away. The week before the dinner, I made 3 phone calls. The first was to our family attorney, who confirmed the mortgage and deed on Willowbend Drive remained in my name alone. The second was to Garrett Shelton. He was not difficult to find and not reluctant to talk. Derek had convinced him to invest $60,000 in a property renovation, then pocketed $30,000 in fabricated consulting fees before the project collapsed. Garrett had considered litigation, but decided chasing someone with no real assets wasn't worth his time. I asked if he'd put it in writing. He agreed. The third call was to a friend in digital media who owed me a favor. By Thursday evening, everything was in place. The dinner was Sunday. Derek arrived last, as he always did, carrying the unhurried confidence of a man who understood that an entrance requires something to enter. He hugged Qley long and warm. He shook my hand, just firmly enough to make the gesture feel like a courtesy, extended to someone mildly tolerable. Dinner was good. The conversation flowed normally, until Derek turned to me with that specific brightness that meant he'd been preparing something. "Logan, I heard you got passed over for the VP position at your company. That's rough." The table went quiet. There was no VP position I'd been passed over for. He'd picked up a fragment somewhere and reshaped it into a narrative where I was smaller in my own career. I kept my voice level and corrected him calmly. He tilted his head with manufactured sympathy. "Corporate politics are brutal. Don't take it personally." Qley said nothing. "Derek," I said, "I'd love to hear about your current projects. That real estate venture you mentioned. How did the Short North project turn out?" The air changed instantly. His smile held, but something shifted behind it. "Different project," he said, a beat too quickly. I picked up my wineglass. Must be thinking of something else. He was quieter after that, watching me differently. Then, during dessert, he made his final mistake. Qley's mother mentioned the kitchen renovation, and Derek said casually directly to her, "Well, it's Qley's house now, so she should do whatever she wants with it." I set down my fork. He corrected himself with an easy smile. Figure of speech, but it wasn't. It was a deliberate claim, planted in front of witnesses, designed to make me a guest in my own home. I stood up. I walked around the table slowly, deliberately, the way I walk when a decision is made and there's no reversing it. I stopped in front of Derek. He looked up at me, smile still in place, but something underneath it had started to recalculate. I leaned in so only he could hear. "Garrett Shelton sends his regards." 7 words. His face didn't crumple all at once. It was more like watching ice crack from the center outward. The smile went first, then the color. His jaw tightened, and his eyes, for the first time since I'd known him, showed something completely real. He knew exactly what those words meant. I straightened up and looked at Qley. I'm not apologizing to Derek, but there are things this family needs to know, and tonight is the right time. She told me to sit down. Instead, I walked to the sideboard, picked up my phone, and held up the county auditor's page. The property deed on Willowbend Drive, my name alone, generated that afternoon. Then I reached into my jacket pocket and placed Garrett Shelton's written statement in the center of the table. Derek borrowed $60,000 from a business partner in a property deal last year, I said. He pocketed $30,000 in fabricated consulting fees before the project collapsed. The partner's name, address, and phone number are at the bottom of that page. Anyone is welcome to call him. The silence was absolute. Derek stood up. This is insane. Qley, he's making this up. Garrett Shelton is a real person, I said quietly. Neil Reed reached for the papers. Sandra watched her son's face, and Derek's face completed its collapse. He walked out while his father was still reading, the front door closing behind him, his car starting in the driveway. The table sat in silence. Qley and I talked until 2 in the morning. She was furious, not because she thought I'd lied, but because I'd done it publicly without giving her the chance to handle it privately. She said I'd humiliated her in front of her family. I told her I'd been humiliated in front of her family for 3 years, and she hadn't said a word. That landed. She cried. I didn't, but it was close. What happened next surprised me. Neil Reed called Garrett Shelton himself, spent 40 minutes on the phone with him, then had a 4-hour conversation with Derek that none of us were present for. Neil gave Derek 2 choices: full restitution to Garrett on a payment plan Neil would personally guarantee, or lose his place in the family. Derek chose restitution. It took 8 months. He had to get a real job in actual sales operations to make it happen. Neil called me personally to tell me, and thanked me in the quiet, difficult way fathers find it hard to thank someone for showing them something true about their child. The $6,000 Derek had never repaid arrived 3 months after the dinner. A check, no note. I deposited it and didn't mention it to anyone. Qley and I did the harder work too, couples therapy, which I'd suggested twice before and which she finally agreed to. She acknowledged she'd let Derek's behavior toward me go on longer than was fair. I acknowledged I should have told her what I'd found before making it a public event. Neither acknowledgement was easy. Both were true. Derek and I are not close, and we won't be, but the dynamic has changed. He no longer makes jokes at my expense. He no longer plants claims in conversations he hasn't earned. When we're in the same room, which still happens because Qley loves her family and I love Qley, he treats me with a careful distance that is the best either of us can manage. I'll take it. My father used to say that the only thing a man like Derek can't survive is someone who keeps score. I kept score, carefully, patiently, and with the specific intention of using it at exactly the right moment. People will call that cold. People will call it calculated. I call it being prepared. Because what I learned watching Derek operate in my house, at my table, with my money and my wife's affection as his currency, is that people who rely on others not keeping score are the most fragile people in any room. They depend on collective amnesia, on everyone being too polite or too conflict-averse to say what they actually know. I am not that person. I never was. And when Qley said apologize or get out, I chose a third option. I made the score visible. The house on Willowbend Drive still stands. The floorboard still squeaks. The creek still freezes every January. And after everything, that's enough.